I call David Clendon.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'm pleased to take a brief call on this quite brief bill. In particular, I'd just like to address Part 1. It tells us in Part 1 that the purpose of this part is to amend Subpart 1 of Part 2 of the Principal Act, in effect to extend it by 1 year until the end of June in 2013. Fairly innocuous on the face of it, but effectively it extends for another year a piece of legislation which has not been proven to be particularly effective, that does have create some serious concerns about the nature of the delivery of justice, of restorative justice indeed, and I'll refer to that point briefly. I think this bill could more rightly, the purpose of this bill could more rightly be stated as actually compensating for the inaction of this government in this term and indeed in the previous term. For whatever reasons, it's interesting to trace the genesis of this bill and how we got to this position we're in. The substantive legislation, of course, passed in 2005 with an expiry date of June 2010. Clearly that this was known, so there was a 5-year opportunity indeed to think through what was going to either replace this bill or indeed to allow it to hit that sunset clause and go out of existence. This government, the National Party's statement of their policy on victims and crime in 2008 made it clear that they intended to maintain something along the lines of this legislation. Therefore, it wasn't that the government had to develop policy. And yet it was not until the 22nd of April 2010 that the government brought into the House a bill to extend the provision, to give the first extension to that 2005 legislation. It was tabled on the 22nd April 2010, a few days later the first reading. One bare calendar month allowed for the Select Committee to consider it. A few days later, under urgency, sent through its second reading, its committee stage and its final reading, to extend to the date coming before us now, to the June 30, 2012. Where once again we find ourselves not in urgency, but certainly looking to pass this legislation a matter of days before it's due to expire, before the sunset clause kicks in. We're doing this under extended hours. Tomorrow morning we can expect that this will go through its final stages. And one must wonder at the process. The expiry of this legislation was, I believe, always intended to be accompanied or to be in parallel with a substantial conversation, a discussion about how best to deal with victims, how best to ensure that victims do get some rightful restitution. And I'm quite sure nobody has any argument with that, and we in the Greens certainly do not. Restorative justice, the principle of restorative justice is at the core of our justice policy. We know that the government has weight of numbers, and it's been supported by the Labor Party for reasons that I can understand up to a point. They are encouraging and open to and hoping and expecting that we'll get a 12-month debate, an intelligent, informed debate about how best to ensure that victims get rightful restitution. I have much less confidence than the Labor Party obviously does that we will get that open debate, simply because we have a bill on the table, this redirection bill, the substantive, that will make most of the provisions of this current legislation permanent. I simply don't have any confidence that in the context of that bill coming up before us quite soon, that there will be this open debate about the very nature of the justice system. Clearly, we all want restitution for victims. A key principle of restorative justice is certainly about restitution, but it's also for the victim to see that the offender has internalised the fact that they offended, that the victim was hurt. The genuine remorse from an offender is an important part of the restorative justice process, and nowhere in the extension of this legislation, or indeed in the redirection bill that we'll be debating presumably sometime in the next few months. Is there really reference to that fundamental part of restorative justice that looks at the whole breadth of the offender once more being made to feel that they are secure, that their rights have been replaced by them?
The Honourable Chester Borrows.
Thank you, Mr Chair. And I